Have you ever given everything to something, a job, a team, a mission, only to be discarded without a second glance the moment you became inconvenient? I have. On a rainy Tuesday morning, after 20 years of service, I was called into a glass-walled conference room with no windows open and no coffee offered. Across the table sat two people who barely knew what I actually did for the company. One was from HR. The other was my new supervisor, younger than my daughter and far less qualified. "Miguel, your position is being eliminated," she said with the kind of calm that comes only from practice. "Today will be your last day." I nodded. Just once. I didn't protest, didn't ask why, didn't offer a defense, because I already knew. And more importantly, because they didn't. My name is Miguel Alvarez. I'm 56 years old, and for the past 2 decades I was the lead infrastructure engineer at Ironview Logistics, one of the most influential supply chain firms in North America. I was the one they always called at midnight when the systems crashed, the one who fixed things before they broke. What they forgot was, the people who know how to hold everything together also know exactly how to take it apart. I joined Ironview Logistics in 2003, back when the company operated out of a modest 2-story office near the freight yard in National City, just south of San Diego. Back then, we tracked cargo with spreadsheets and walkie-talkies. I was hired to bring the system into the digital age. No manuals, no roadmap, just a server, a budget, and a promise. Within 3 years, I'd built our internal logistics platform from scratch. By the end of the decade, I'd scaled it to manage transnational shipments, integrate satellite GPS updates, and automate customs paperwork. Through 3 rebrands, 2 ownership changes, and an attempted merger, I stayed. While others jumped ship for startups and Silicon Valley perks, I stayed. My daughter was 6 when I started. She's in her final year of medical school now. Birthdays, school plays, even a few anniversaries. I missed them. Logged in from hotel, rooms or empty offices. Patching systems through holidays and weekends. I never asked for overtime or bonuses. Loyalty, I believed, still meant something. Ironview grew fast. With contracts from major ports and defense suppliers, it ballooned from 50 employees to over 700. My team expanded too. I trained every systems engineer who walked through the door. I wrote most of the protocols they still use. I was never flashy, never political. I didn't chase titles. I just made things work. Then about a year ago, something shifted. We got a new CFO, Claire Renner. Sharp suit, sharp voice, no patience for anything she couldn't explain on a PowerPoint slide. She referred to our engineering division as technical overhead, which told me everything I needed to know. At first, she left me alone. She didn't understand what I did, and I didn't make her job harder. Then came Eli Parker. Young, energetic, just enough technical fluency to sound impressive to non-technical people. He was brought in as a transformation consultant, one of those ambiguous titles that always seems to mean bad news for someone. He had polished slides, flashy graphs, and buzzwords that made people nod even when they didn't understand. I noticed the small things first. Departmental budget meetings were moved without me. Access requests I normally reviewed started getting routed elsewhere. System architecture updates were pushed live without notifying my team. It wasn't blatant, not at first. Just a quiet pruning of influence, of oversight. Of me. I mentioned it to Lucia, my wife, one night as we were cleaning up dinner. "They're moving around pieces," I said. "Trying to streamline. Or at least that's what they're calling it." She looked at me over her glasses. "You think they're setting you up?" "I think," I said slowly, "they're assuming I'm not paying attention." But I was. In truth, I'd been watching for a long time. Years earlier, when Ironview nearly lost a defense contract over a data breach, I was asked to build a redundancy and audit trail system strong enough to withstand federal scrutiny. I designed it myself. Quietly, I kept backups of key logs, just in case. Not because I didn't trust the company, but because I understood people and power. And what happens when money starts moving faster than ethics. So when Claire and Eli began their quiet reshuffle, I didn't protest. I documented. I started going in earlier, staying later. watching access logs, permissions, movement. I asked quiet questions, nothing direct, nothing that would raise alarms, just enough to confirm my suspicion. Someone was consolidating control, but why? The answer would come. And when it did, it would explain everything. The coldness in that conference room, the carefully rehearsed script they read from, the fact that my departure was scheduled precisely on the week before quarterly. Financials were due. It wasn't personal, it was strategic. What they didn't realize, what no one seemed to realize, was that for 20 years, while I patched and built and repaired, I had also been watching. And I knew every system, every bypass, every undocumented change ever made. They thought I was gone. But I was just getting started. The official meeting lasted under 5 minutes. Claire sat at the end of the long glass conference table, flanked by Marissa from HR, a quiet, efficient woman who couldn't meet my eyes, and a small man I'd never seen before who didn't speak at all. Claire began with a statement that sounded like it had been memorized. Maybe it had been rehearsed too. Due to organizational restructuring and evolving strategic priorities, your position has been deemed redundant. Today will be your final day. I waited. Sometimes people offer reasons, performance metrics, cost efficiency, cultural alignment. But Claire gave none. Just the kind of cold formality that dares you to argue, as if emotional detachment somehow justified the decision. I nodded once. No smile, no words, no anger. Just the calm silence of someone who already knows the ending and has already started rewriting the next chapter. I stood, turned toward the door, and paused only for a moment. Not for effect, but to let myself memorize the moment. Not the people, the feeling, the clarity. Back at my desk, a few heads turned. The younger engineers looked confused, uncertain whether to speak or stay silent. One of them, Anna, who I'd mentored for over 2 years, opened her mouth, then closed it again, visibly torn. I gave her a small nod. She didn't need to say anything. I opened my drawers methodically, framed photos of Lucia and our daughter, a coffee mug etched with the old Ironview logo, a notebook filled with 20 years of sketches, ideas, backdoor scripts, and small thoughts that solved big problems. Everything fit neatly into one box. No security escort, no handshake from leadership. Just a quietly revoked ID badge and an email signature that would vanish within the hour. As I walked out, I passed the main operations hub, my floor, my kingdom, and saw Eli Parker through the glass sitting comfortably in what had once been my office. He was laughing at something on his phone. That image stayed with me longer than I expected, not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected. They thought the job was done, but the real work hadn't even begun, not yet. The house was quiet that evening, the kind of silence that settles not from peace but from a question hanging in the air that no one wants to ask out loud. Lucia was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of lentils with the same rhythmic motion she used when she was thinking something through. She hadn't asked how the meeting went. She didn't have to. Instead, she said softly, "So, it happened?" I nodded, setting the small box of my office belongings on the table beside her. Just like I expected. She turned off the stove and faced me. "Was it about the system access changes you told me about?" I sat down, rubbed my palms together slowly. That was the beginning. The changes had started about 3 months prior. So small they might have gone unnoticed by someone less familiar. Permissions quietly shifted in the back end. Admin logs that used to ping me no longer did. Firewall exception rules were altered. One morning, I logged in and saw that my clearance had been limited on 2 internal audit dashboards. Dashboards I'd helped design. I remember the moment it became clear. I'd been in the server room running a routine patch verification when I noticed the timestamp of a recent override. It wasn't one of my team. It was someone from finance using temporary credentials authorized by Claire herself. Most wouldn't have noticed, but I did, because I always did. That night I remembered something my mentor once told me when I was just starting out. Logs don't lie. People do. It was the same mentor who taught me to always leave a trace, not for others, but for myself. If someone ever tries to rewrite history, he said, make sure you have the original version backed up. So I did. For years. Off-site backups. External drives labeled with unrelated names. A private encrypted data cache buried deep within a server cluster I'd configured in the early days. Nothing illegal. Nothing stolen. Just preserved. You don't stay in a company for 20 years without learning that people forget the foundations. They assume the systems are self-sustaining, that everything just works. They stop asking how or who. They stopped asking me. 2 weeks before I was fired, I ran into Eli Parker in the elevator. He smiled casually, made some comment about sunsetting legacy tools. I nodded, then asked if he'd reviewed the full architecture stack before making his recommendations. His smile faltered just slightly. We have people for that, he said, glancing at his phone. That was the moment I knew. He hadn't looked. Claire hadn't either. They were gutting the infrastructure without understanding what held it together. They thought modernization was just buying slick new platforms and hiring fresh graduates with certificates. What they didn't realize was that most of those sleek new tools were duct-taped on top of older systems, connected by scripts I'd personally written, scripts no one else even knew existed. And when you cut out the one person who knows how, the whole machine runs. Well, things tend to fall apart in ways no one sees coming. I didn't say anything to Lucia right then. Instead, I handed her the mug from my desk, the one with the Ironview logo she'd given me on my 10th work anniversary. She looked at it for a long time before saying, "They really don't know what they've just done, do they?" I shook my head once. "They will," I said. "Soon." The morning after I was let go, I woke before the alarm that no longer had a purpose. The house was still, the sky outside just beginning to glow with that early pale blue light. Lucia had left a thermos of coffee on my desk with a note that said, "Take today to think. I've got everything else." But I wasn't thinking. I was working. From the bottom drawer of my home office desk, I pulled out a matte black external drive. No label, no markings. One of 5 I kept hidden among the spare parts and service manuals. It contained security logs, system snapshots, access records. Nothing proprietary in itself, but rich in metadata, timestamps, user IDs, IP routes. The kind of quiet data no one thinks to delete because they forget it even exists. I began combing through the last 90 days. And it didn't take long to find what I hadn't been able to prove before. Ironview had been making regular payments to a company called Veritas Solutions LLC, starting small, just under compliance thresholds, but gradually increasing month over month. The services listed were generic: infrastructure consulting, cloud optimization, tech migration planning. But none of those projects had passed through my department. If they had existed at all, I would have known. The address listed for Veritas was a virtual suite in Phoenix. No office, no website, no team. Registered just 15 months ago with a single manager on record, Natalie Byrne. The name triggered something. I opened Claire Renner's LinkedIn profile, scrolled past the buzzwords and fake humility until I found it. University of Washington, class of 2006. Natalie Byrne, classmate, former roommate, now conveniently listed as CEO of Veritas. Interesting, but that wasn't the only detail. I pulled up archived payroll logs from an old backup I'd stored off-grid. A few employees listed under IT operations had no history of login activity, no badge swipes, no email accounts. Ghost employees, salaries paid, benefits withdrawn, taxes withheld, but no digital footprint inside the company. Veritas received its largest payment the same month those phantom employees were added to payroll. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was a funnel. I opened a new spreadsheet, began documenting everything: dates, payment amounts, user access logs, internal approvals. A clear pattern emerged. Every financial transaction to Veritas had a matching authorization from Claire's office, sometimes routed through a proxy manager or low-level compliance tool. Always masked, never flagged, but the line was unmistakable. Around midday, my phone buzzed. A message from Jordan, a junior engineer I had mentored over the last year. He was smart, ambitious, and had a good instinct for systems thinking. We'd shared more than a few late nights fixing broken code deployments when no one else stuck around. Hey Miguel, random question. You ever seen Optima services on our vendor list? Saw it on a billing dashboard I wasn't supposed to access. $9,000 charge for digital efficiency analysis? Doesn't sound like a real thing. I stared at the message for a long moment. Another shell? Maybe. Or a branch of the same tree. Either way, Jordan had confirmed what I suspected. I wasn't the only one noticing the cracks. I called him. Don't look into it further, I said quietly. Wait, what? Why not? Because I'm already looking, I replied. And this doesn't end in a billing error. Trust me. He hesitated. Are you saying there's something? I'm saying, I cut in. This is bigger than one invoice. I need you to stay visible. Normal. Don't dig. Don't mention anything to anyone. Just watch. A long pause, then. Okay. Got it. After we hung up, I returned to the spreadsheet. I added Jordan's discovery under a new section. Linked shell vendors. Optima, Veritas, and 2 others with similar patterns. Same time frame, same authorization flow, same vague service descriptions. By the time the sun set, I had over 100 entries. Payments totaling more than $2.6 million. Inflated software licenses, consulting fees, payroll for employees who didn't exist. All approved under efficiency initiatives. And at the center of every document trail, Claire Renner. But there was one thing still missing. Something that would tie this to someone higher. Someone who needed me out of the way. I opened the email logs I had archived before my departure. Not the contents, those I didn't have, but the metadata. Sender, receiver, subject lines, timestamps. Buried among them, I found a chain labeled Strategic Phase 2, Sunset Miguel Access, sent by Eli Parker, copied to Claire. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly. They hadn't just fired me. They'd planned it, labeled it, and now it was my turn to name the next phase. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was anxious, but because clarity can be its own kind of adrenaline. The pieces were no longer scattered fragments. They had form now. Direction. A timeline. A money trail. And an intent. All I needed was a way to make the right people see it without giving them time to bury it, and I knew exactly how. The next morning, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, opened my personal laptop, and accessed a private development server I had used years ago to test IronView's email redundancy system. Buried within that server was a dormant domain, ivsecure.com, designed to simulate internal email routing for security drills. It looked identical to company email but didn't exist in the corporate directory. I'd created it with approval from the previous CTO during a cybersecurity audit, forgotten by everyone since. Using this, I set up a new email identity, security.audit8ivsecure.com. Then I drafted a short, tightly worded message. No emotion, no accusation, just the facts. Selective payments, shell companies, suspect payroll entries, and attached evidence highlighting specific irregularities. Just enough to cause discomfort. Not enough to confirm the full scale. Subject: financial irregularities, immediate review. Recommended recipient: Claire Renner. Time sent: 9:14 a.m., Tuesday. Then I waited. At 9:27, she opened it. At 9:31, she forwarded it to Eli. At 9:34, he replied, "Handle it. Make sure there's no leak." By 9:36, my phone rang. Claire's number. I didn't answer. At 9:42, an email from Marissa in HR landed in my inbox. "Mr. Alvarez, your recent communications may constitute a violation of your separation agreement. Cease contact immediately or we will pursue legal recourse." I smiled. I had signed no separation agreement, just another assumption on their part, that I'd leave quietly, forgettable, disposable. I moved to the second phase. There was one person, inside Ironview, who would understand the full scope of what I'd uncovered. Thomas Beck, longtime board member, former Navy cybersecurity lead, and the only executive who'd ever asked me real questions about risk architecture. Years ago, we'd worked together when Ironview implemented compliance protocols for defense contracts. He'd respected my work then. More importantly, he'd trusted it. I found his personal contact still saved from a holiday card list. At 2:04 p.m., I called. "Thomas, it's Miguel Alvarez." A pause. "Well, that's a voice I haven't heard in a while." "I'm not calling about a job," I said. "I'm calling about something I think the board needs to see." Another pause, but this time, shorter. "Can you be in La Jolla by 4? I'll bring the files." That afternoon, we met on the patio of a quiet seaside cafe. He looked thinner than I remembered, retired from active board involvement but still attending quarterly reviews. I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a printed summary, a list of flagged transactions, registration links to Veritas, payroll anomalies, and a flash drive with supporting logs, my spreadsheet, my notes, a timeline. "This is extensive," he murmured as he skimmed. "I didn't come for sympathy," I said. "I came because I believe your company is being stolen from, not by hackers, from the inside." His eyes narrowed at the word "your." A subtle cue. I wanted him to feel ownership, not distance. This wasn't my problem anymore. It was his. "Why now?" he asked. "Because the fraud is about to scale," I replied. "And because they removed the only person who could have stopped it. They thought they were being clever, but they forgot who designed the system." He closed the folder carefully. "You're not looking to be rehired?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not trying to get back in. I just want the right people to know before the wrong people bury it." He nodded. "You were always thorough, Miguel. I'll make sure the board sees this." As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. "Jordan. Claire just called an emergency meeting. Eli's in it. They're locking down finance systems." "What the hell did you send them?" I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop, uploaded a final copy of my report to a secure external archive, encrypted with rolling passwords, then scheduled a series of emails. One to go out to every board member, one to a contact at a regional business journal, and one, just in case, to a legal firm specializing in corporate whistleblower protection. Then I sat back, folded my hands, and waited. By the time they realized what was coming, it would already be too late to stop it. The first sign that the storm had landed came not from an email or a phone call, but from silence. Wednesday morning, I watched from my car as employees filed into Ironview's corporate office downtown. There was a stiffness to their walk, the kind that only appears when a company's leadership has called an all-hands meeting without warning. Something had clearly reached the upper floor. At exactly 8:59 a.m., the emails I scheduled went live. One by one, 10 board members received the complete package, a timeline of events, evidence of financial misconduct, supporting documentation, and cross-referenced data showing how Claire and Eli had rerouted millions through fictitious vendors. By 9:17, the first call came in. I didn't recognize the number. Then another and another. I ignored them all. My report had already been read. The facts were undeniable. At 9:45, Jordan texted me again. "Something's happening. 2 guys in suits just walked into the finance department. Claire's office door is shut. Eli's nowhere to be seen." By 10:04, the local network news sites began reporting that Ironview Logistics had abruptly postponed its scheduled quarterly earnings call. No official reason was given, but the boardroom, I imagined, was in chaos. At 10:27, a new name popped up on my phone. Patricia Hammond, Ironview's general counsel. I answered. "Mr. Alvarez," she began with a controlled tone. "We've received documents you allegedly distributed to the board. These contain highly sensitive material." "I don't allegedly distribute anything," I replied calmly. "Everything I sent is factual and documented. Nevertheless, you may be in breach of several confidentiality clauses." I signed nothing, I interrupted. No NDA, no separation agreement, nothing binding. You'll find all records of that in your own HR logs. She paused. We'd like to resolve this discreetly. So would I said. Which is why I made sure the report went only to those with a fiduciary duty to investigate. And just to be clear, if anything happens to me or my family, full copies are scheduled for automatic release to the press, the SEC, and 3 state attorneys general. Another pause, this one longer. When she spoke again, her voice was cooler. The board is taking this seriously. They're convening an emergency finance committee session. Good, I said and hung up. At noon, I stepped out for lunch and left my phone in a drawer. By the time I came back, I had 9 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and a text from Lucia. Jason Phillips came by the house, asked if you were home. I told him you were out. He didn't look pleased. Jason Phillips, the consultant Eli brought in off-book to facilitate system upgrades. His name wasn't tied directly to any of the vendor payments, but I'd found his firm on the recipient list of an untraceable consulting fee issued from the same fund Veritas drew from. He had reason to be nervous. At 2:31 p.m., Jordan sent a single line. Police just arrived. The text was followed by a photo. 2 plainclothes officers standing outside the conference room on the executive floor. One of them held a folder. Claire's name was visible on the front. At 3:12, another message. They're questioning Claire and Eli separately. Jason looks like he's seen a ghost. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove north, away from downtown to a quiet coffee shop overlooking the bay. I brought my laptop, logged into my secure portal, and reviewed my backup logs. Everything had gone out on schedule. The files had been received, opened, reviewed. The timestamps confirmed it. By 4, regional media outlets were circling. I knew this because a friend at a local news station sent me a link to a breaking alert. Ironview executives under investigation for alleged financial misconduct. Sources suggest internal whistleblower provided evidence. They didn't name names. Not yet, but that would come. And still, I waited. At 5:45 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Thomas Beck. It's done, he said without greeting. Claire and Eli have been placed on immediate administrative leave. Jason's been escorted. Off the premises, the board has initiated a full forensic audit. I exhaled, slow and deliberate. They're moving fast. They have to. What you uncovered wasn't just unethical, it's criminal. The estimated loss is now over $4 million, possibly more. I said nothing. Thomas added, the board wants to talk to you, not just to thank you. They're considering a new role, something that reports directly to us. A security position with oversight authority. Would you be open to that conversation? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the window at the sun setting behind the skyline, casting a golden haze across the Pacific. The same skyline I'd spent 20 years beneath, building systems for people who never saw me until I was gone. Let them put it in writing, I said finally. Then we'll talk. As I hung up, I realized the storm had passed, but the aftershocks had only begun. By Thursday morning, the headlines had caught up with the reality. Every major business outlet in the region had some version of the story. Ironview Logistics under investigation for internal fraud scheme. Anonymous whistleblower triggers, multi-million-dollar audit. Top executives suspended amid allegations of embezzlement and payroll manipulation. Still no names mentioned publicly, but within the industry, word traveled fast, and anyone who knew Ironview knew who those headlines pointed to. What none of them knew yet was who had set it all in motion. I spent the morning quietly sipping coffee in the kitchen while Lucia read aloud from the newspaper, a touch of disbelief in her voice. They're calling it one of the largest internal integrity failures in the company's history. You didn't just expose a crack, you broke the dam. I smiled faintly, not from pride, but from closure. They broke it themselves. I just stopped patching the leaks. Just before noon, I received a call from Thomas Beck again. Miguel, the board met early this morning, he said. The audit committee wants to bring you back, not in your old role, but something new. Chief Risk and Integrity Officer. would report directly to the board, independent of all departments. I paused. That's a big shift. It is, he agreed. But we need someone who understands not just systems but people. Someone who doesn't just see code, but behavior. We don't want this to happen again. I told him I'd think about it. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Anders Global, a rival logistics tech firm I had turned down years ago. The subject line was simple. Still interested? Attached was a contract offer, 20% above my highest IronView salary, full autonomy, and a signing bonus that made me blink. Another email followed, this time from Ridgewave, a defense contractor with a reputation for cutting-edge infrastructure. They didn't even bother asking for a resume, just asked when I'd be available to talk. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 20 years, I was quietly indispensable and wholly overlooked. Now I was invisible no longer. I didn't respond right away. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because I wasn't finished. Not yet. At 4 p.m., Jordan called. He sounded shaken. They're scrubbing everything. Access logs, system files, stuff they shouldn't be touching. By they, you mean? ET leadership. What's left of it? But here's the thing. I pulled a backup from the vault you taught me to maintain. There's still a trail. I closed my eyes for a moment, proud and concerned at the same time. Jordan, listen to me carefully. You don't get involved. You've done enough. I just don't want them rewriting the story, he said quietly. They won't, I replied. I've already made sure of that. That night, I took Lucia to dinner. Nothing extravagant, just our favorite corner table at the small Argentinian place we'd gone to since before our daughter was born. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe, to sit, to be still. Halfway through the meal, I received a message from Thomas. Board vote unanimous. Offer stands. Full authority. You decide when to walk through the door. I didn't reply. I looked at Lucia instead, who smiled as if she already knew what the message was about. You going back? She asked softly. I'm not sure, I said. Going back means working with people who looked right through me while the rot grew under their feet. Maybe, she said. Or maybe it means building something better, because this time you're not under anyone's feet. You're above them. That thought stayed with me long after we left the restaurant. I returned home and opened my laptop, not to check logs, not to tweak code, but to write a simple message on my LinkedIn profile, quiet and sharp. I wasn't let go. I was released and I came back with the keys. Within an hour, former colleagues began reaching out. Messages of congratulations, of apologies, of disbelief. Some admitted they'd suspected something was off, but had been afraid to speak. Others simply said thank you, and slowly I began to realize it wasn't just a personal victory. It was a reckoning. Not just for me, but for every quiet, competent professional who gets sidelined because they refuse to play politics, because they believe in the work more than the titles. This wasn't revenge, it was repair, the kind that sticks. People like to say, don't burn bridges. But sometimes bridges don't need to be burned. They collapse quietly, under the weight of ego, unchecked power, and the belief that no one is watching. At IronView, it wasn't fire that brought down the people at the top. It was gravity. It was truth. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't shout, threaten, or retaliate in anger. I simply did what I'd always done. I followed the system. I read between the lines. And when the cracks grew, too wide to ignore, I made sure someone saw them. This wasn't revenge. It was accountability. And maybe more importantly, it was a reminder that silence isn't weakness. Observation isn't passivity. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the clearest picture of what's really going on. So let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have stayed quiet or spoken up? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd genuinely like to know how you see it. If this story resonated with you, go ahead and hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true life stories that dig deeper than the headlines. Because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make noise, but it makes a difference.